Hello everyone, my name's Anne Harbers. I'm one of the subject coordinators for our subject BIZ102. This is a short video to assist you with assessment 3, which is due in week 8. This assessment has 800 words. It's a reflective journal, just like you did in assessment 1, but this time it's based on your module 4 on diversity and inclusion. It's worth 25% due in week 8. A couple of things to note that, as we said, it's focused on module 4. You write it in the style of a reflective journal. And as always, we strongly recommend you read your assessment brief carefully so you know what to do. If you're not sure, you speak to your lecturer, and we always recommend you take a good note of the assessment rubric, the marking rubric at the end of your assessment that tells you how the marks will be allocated. So for this assessment, 40% of the marks are on your relationship of what you're writing in your reflective journal and linking it back to the theory. I'll give you some hints about what you can use for that theory in this video. The 30% is you relating it in a good reflection to how you're going to use this information you've learnt from module 4, from assessment 3, into your future professional practice. That is, what are your goals? What do you want to do in the future? 20% is the flow and the structure of a good reflective journal written appropriately. And then 10% is using your APA 7th referencing. So that means in-text referencing and the reference list at the end. Now, what are you being asked to do? There are 2 parts in this assessment. The first is a podcast that you are recording. So you will be paired with another person in your class. Some classes may use 3, but most have got 2 in a group. And you're going to be recording 5 to 7 minutes per person with a set of questions from this assessment brief. So you've got a specific set of questions that each person needs to answer, record them together into one recording, which should come out as an MP3 file. The second part is to then use that information and the experience of talking to someone as the basis for another set of questions, which is your reflective journal itself. So you need to include the audio file, and it has to be accessible to your lecturer so they can listen. You also need to obviously upload the reflective journal you're writing. Remember, in reflective writing, you can use I and me. It's not what's good for other people. It is you, yourself, what you're learning is going to be important for you. And then you need to do your referencing. And this time we're asking you to have at least 4 references, 2 from the module, from module 4, and 2 external, though some students do use all from the module, and that's fine as well. So in week 7, you're being asked to do your diversity fingerprint and post a Padlet, or in the week that you're advised to do it. Then the next week, do the interview, do the recording, and then do the assessment write-up. The key to self-directed learning is reflection. So you know that reflection has got a very high focus in BIZ102. As we've said, this is the direct wording from the assessment brief. So part 1, is a conversation or an interview, depending on which way you're going to say it, about diversity with a specific set of questions, which is recorded. Part 2 is the reflective journal. That's a conversation, that's based on the conversation and what you've learnt. So what do we mean? Let's look at the more information. Now, initially, to find your partner or the person you're going to pair up with for this activity, for the interview, your lecturer will probably give you the opportunity to do some diversity speed interviews in class, whether that's an online class or whether it's a face-to-face class. And what we're asking you to do here is to find at least 3 ways you are different from someone else. Now, we've put a range of diversity different areas here, whether it's age or gender or cultural background. Remember, you don't have to speak about anything unless you're comfortable with it. So some students feel quite comfortable with some of these areas that they are very happy to speak about, and some students would prefer not to. So it's completely up to you. So for instance, something like sexual orientation, some students have had a bit of a journey and they like to speak or want to explain. Some students, it's very private and it's not something they want to. So there's absolutely no obligation to speak about anything that you don't want to. You have to then look for other ways that your social identity may be different. And in the class, it's going to be repeated a number of times so you can meet some different people. Then part 1, as we said, based on finding at least 3 ways you're different from someone else in the class, you have this set of questions. Tell me about your social identity. What are you most proud of achieving so far in your life? What obstacles have you had to face so far? What's your professional identity? So some students already work and some are aiming to work in a particular area. So talk about what your hopes might be if you don't have an area that you've already worked in. And then the 5th question is, what should your future employer know about the skills you have and your story to relate to a diverse and inclusive workplace or an industry that relates to VUCA? And I will explain VUCA in a minute. So they are the questions that you need to use in the interview. 2 people in the interview, each person has to answer these questions. Some students, one answers them and then the other, put it all in one recording. Some students, each question, one student answers it, the next, and then it's more like a conversation. Then they go to the next question and they both answer. We're happy either way, but remember 5 to 7 minutes per person. So that whole interview should be around the 10 to 15 minutes. So these are the areas. I just highlighted them before on the speed interview page, but these are a range of different ways you may be different to another person. So that's the interview part. These are the questions clearly stated. So these are the ones you need to pick out for your interview part. Now, the second part is your reflective journal. Now, in your initial reflective journal in assessment 1, you used a survey to be the stimulus, the thing you described and thought about before you went on to answer the questions. This time, it's the interview. What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about the other person? Now, that doesn't mean that you need to tell us word for word what the interview is, because we have that as the podcast. But often students want to say, well, you know, the person I spoke to has had quite a different life journey to me. And then how did that make you think? How did that make you realize that we all have diversity? We all have things that make us different, but we absolutely also have things that make us similar, that we could relate to each other. So first question, what have you learned about yourself in this conversation? What specific theoretical concept from this module gives you the greatest understanding of your approach to diversity and inclusion? So hopefully you'll meet someone who's quite different to you, and that gives you a chance to find out some things that might not be things you'd thought about in your life. Thirdly, what competencies, skills, and qualities might be critical for your future career relating to diversity and inclusion, because remember, that's our topic. And we're talking about in the VUCA world. I'll explain that term in a minute. It's something you will do in week 8. You also are asked to explain your top 5 VIA or VIA character strengths and how they will be valuable in this question about your competencies, skills, qualities, and your ability to relate to diversity and inclusion. So all of that together is that final third question. So there's quite a bit to think about there. Remember, this is a reflective journal, so it has a number of steps. The perception, how were you feeling before the podcast? Maybe you're a bit nervous. It's really normal to be nervous. Thinking about how you're going to have your conversation. Interpretation, what did you learn from the podcast interview about the other person, their social and professional identity? Now remember, that only works well if you're listening. You're there to learn about them, not just tell them your story. The next one is the emotion. What did you think and feel in relation to the interview, especially when you were telling your proudest moments and your challenges, and when you were listening to the other person tell about their proudest moments and their challenges? The next is intention. How are you going to intend to use this knowledge? What have you learnt? Has it challenged some of your beliefs? Has it helped you think about some things? And then the fifth one, what will you do now? How will you use this experience about diversity to be more inclusive in the VUCA world? Now, we've used this VUCA term a few times, so I'll explain it in a minute. So we're following the reflective writing, which is the normal Gibbs reflective cycle. So what is VUCA? In your essential resources in module 4.2, there's this excellent article by Innovation People, which talks about VUCA. It's a really good article, and it's very, very important that you read it as related to this module. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It says that our current world is all these things, that the certainty that we used to have doesn't exist the same way, that things can change quickly, that things are complex, and often you don't have straight answers. And any of you who have lived through COVID, which is everybody, knows how that can change things. So you have had a very specific real life experience of VUCA, but it's not just that. Jobs changed, people's lives changed, people's travel changed, their contact with family. All of these things are part of this current VUCA environment. And how well we cope with it can depend on us as different people. But what this module is also encouraging you to do is think about how well you did cope, where were the areas you felt less certain, and how's that compared to other people? This is another aspect of diversity, but it's also a really important life skill that we know that students will need in the future to be effective in the workplace. So thinking about your module 1 and module 2, think about the topic 1 and topic 2 within module 4. That's what I meant to say. Also think about what you're asked to include in this assessment submission. So you need to include your podcast. You need to include your diversity fingerprint into the appendix. All of the students have been asked to do that. You need your 4 references. 2 must be from at least 2 from module 4.1 and 4.2. You can use all of them from there. That's also fine. You're asked to also in the appendix, or you can upload it separately. So the audio file, your diversity fingerprint, and your Word document with the reflective journal. The essential resources from module 4 are really excellent. So there's all of these. We're showing you the Innovation People, the VUCA one. There's a great little video from the McKinsey. There's also a very good article by a author called Schmerling that was in a Sydney Morning Herald a number of years ago, but it's got great information about the work world and what competencies and skills you may need, and soft skills, and also some other material, the VUCA Learner, and some other material all about VUCA that you'll be able to read and look at in module 4.2. So again, the essential steps: prepare your diversity fingerprint, Read over the assessment, follow the lecturer's explanation, find your class colleague for the interview, do the podcast, record it, and then write up your assessment reflective journal and submit it all in week 8. Remembering to do your referencing. So excellent. Hopefully you'll enjoy this. We have heard back from many students that they've found this assessment challenging, but incredibly rewarding. And many, many students have met other people in the class and really liked the fact that they could get to know some others, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's online. So good luck. We're looking forward to your submissions. All the best. Bye.